Uh, all right, folks, whoever is able to put on their camera, that would be amazing. And whoever can't, we understand. Oh, Alice, okay, very nice. So I have a question. When Jewish people have been faced the last couple thousand years with, hi, Shoshana Bina. Welcome, welcome. So when Jewish people have been faced with trying circumstances, with anti-Semitism, and anti-Semitism probably in the last 2,000 years has showed itself in many different ways, of course. What are the different responses that Jews have expressed in the face of anti-Semitism? Anybody?
To become more insular, to separate, to not, to hide.
Excellent, right? Some Jews became more insular. Exactly. They lived in ghettos. Sometimes
Yes.
being insular was not something that they had a choice even, right?
Mm-hmm.
Rabbi,
Yes, Esther?
unfortunately, sometimes they hid their true identity. They took on other faiths,
Yeah. Okay.
And
very
not
good.
only that, like, I don't want to speak Lashon Hora, a particular man from Poland who went to France and got one of the highest positions in the Catholic, we were always concerned he might have been voted for that office in that little country.
Vatican.
Yeah.
Okay.
Baruch Hashem, Baruch Hashem.
Oh, okay, I know who you mean. Okay.
Talk about conspiracy. That would have been the oy vey of all.
Okay, very good.
Sorry if I offended anyone.
No. Thank you for sharing. Right. So sometimes Jews have assimilated. We welcome Tim. We welcome Celia, Marty. Thank you, folks, for joining. Right. So sometimes Jews, they assimilate. Right. Sometimes it's an easier thing to do. So we have creating walls of separation. We have assimilation, which are definitely some of the more prevalent ways that people and Jews have done things. Okay, very good. So we have two rabbinic holidays. We have biblical holidays, of course, right? Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot. We have Pesach and Shavuos. Those are biblical holidays. But we have also rabbinic holidays. Two basic ones that we know, Purim and Hanukkah. Only one of them, though, was canonized. Hello, Irma, welcome. Was canonized to be part of the writings of the Jewish people in Megillah Esther. Why? Why is that? Why is the story of Hanukkah not a story that was written down and given over for generations? It should be shared with the people, Jewish people, a documented part of, not just the history, but canonized, meaning that it's part of Ksuvim, part of the written holy works of the Jewish people. It's not the story of Hanukkah, but the story of Purim is. What's interesting to note is who was responsible for this to actually happen. Now, the two main lead characters, I guess, interesting. You could say if you were looking for nominations for Academy Awards, leading best actor, leading best actress, So you have Mordecai and Esther, of course, right? They're playing the lead roles. And of course, they work together in saving the Jewish people. But it's only Esther that is the one who makes the request that the story of Purim should be something written down and should be canonized and should be part of the Jewish people for time immemorial. Let's take a look over here. Welcome, everybody. Okay. Okay. See the screen before you? So, text number 1. The verses imply that Mordecai only called for Purim to be commemorated with joy, but he did not call for its documentation nor its annual public reading. It was Esther primarily pushed for this, as the Talmud relates. Esther said to the sages, "Write my story for future generations." Kisfuni l'dairos. There in the story of the Megillah. So obviously Esther saw something that was particular about this story that needed to be enshrined for Jewish tradition forever. And the obvious question is why? And conversely, we need to understand Mordecai didn't object, but he was not a prime mover together with Esther in asking for this to be canonized, to be part of the Jewish people. And the obvious question is, what was his reservation? In the end, he agrees to it, but he did not forthright come and ask that this should be part of the canonizing work that should be part of the Jewish people forever. So we now understand this. So to understand this, we need to dig a little deeper. This is an idea that we taught, part of an idea. It's not the entire idea. This is taking an idea even a bit further. Some of the thoughts that we spoke about last week in my yeshiva. So some of you might be familiar with part of this or this idea, basic idea. And that is the Jewish people at that time were placed in high places. The queen was Jewish, Esther, of course, and Mordecai himself was also in the king's court, had a position of prominence in the kingdom. Not only that, but the Jewish people, they lived in a very, what's the word, in great wealth, great acceptance. There was no problem that the Jews were experiencing at that time. And then without warning, little less than a year to prepare for the annihilation of the Jewish people. As we know the story with Haman, that he wanted to annihilate the Jewish people. Now, of course, the question is, why? What was it that the Jewish people did that deserved them to get this decree? As we know, everything that happens in this world only happens because heaven allows it to happen. So our sages asked this very question in the Talmud. In the tractate Megillah, the students of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai asked him, for what reason were the Jewish people in that generation deserving of annihilation? Rabbi Shimon said to them, you tell me. So I ask you, you tell me. Okay. So they told him, it's because they enjoyed the feast of the wicked one, Achashverosh. He responded, this might be true for those in Shushan, but for those in the rest of the world who did not participate in the feast, why should they be killed? They said to him, then you tell us. He said to them, because they prostrated before the idol. So what does this mean? So Shushan's Jews were, enjoyed a meal. Because of that, they have to be annihilated. What does that mean? because they took pleasure in that evil individual. What does that mean? And what does it mean that the rest of them, that they, how do we make an equivalence between that and the Jews bowing down to idolatry? And bowing down to idolatry, we understand that idea at least. But what is the relationship between the two things? That because of that, all of them are deserved. So text number 3 from the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe explains, of the two reasons mentioned in the Talmud, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai maintains that the extreme spiritual downfall experienced by the Jews before Purim was a result of idolatry. At the time, the growing opinion among Jews was that the human survival came from achieving physical power and standing. In other words, they believed living a materialistic and worldly lifestyle was paramount. Accordingly, they felt the need to focus on their status as a means of advancing their physical lives. The above was the foundation of Nebuchadnezzar's philosophy, and this was the Jews' sinning of bowing to Nebuchadnezzar's idol. Bowing means here surrendering your own beliefs while allowing others to supersede your own. Adopting such ill-grounded logic eventually led many Jews to steadily abandon their faith, carelessly desecrating their Jewish heritage and practices as they did. So the Jewish people, I asked you at the beginning of the class, what happens when you experience difficulties from the world around you? What do the Jews do? So sometimes they put up walls, and sometimes what the Jews did is they assimilated. So here, a vulnerable minority, the Jewish people, they chose assimilation in order to solidify their stand amongst society. Because after all, this is a society they lived in, this is a society they wanted to flourish in, and they figured, we are an endangered species, and we need to strengthen ourselves. The Medrash explains this as following, that the Jewish people are like one sheep among 70 wolves. There's 70 nations of the world. The Jewish people are like the one sheep. Why are we able to survive? How can a sheep live among 70 wolves? That's not possible. Only if you have a great shepherd. And our great shepherd is our protectorate amongst the 70 wolves, which is God Almighty, of course. He's the ultimate shepherd. He is constantly protecting us. And therefore, we are under a supernatural, supernatural way of existence. Because again, one sheep will not survive amongst 70 wolves, only because God protects us. But once the Jewish people bowed down to, not just in a literal sense, ultimately became in a literal sense, but even in a non-literal sense, right? In the fact that they bowed down to the values of the society around them, and they engaged in believing that who will be our protectorate will be the nations that we live amongst. So what happened? This was not a punishment from God, but this was a natural consequence. If you throw away the shepherd who is protecting the sheep from the 70 lambs, then all of a sudden what will happen? The 70 lambs will now come and get their just desert. Is that clear? Is that idea clear? Yep. Okay. So it was not a punishment, but a consequence of the Jews and their behavior at that time. So we have the relationship between idolatry and ultimately having pleasure from that particular Suda, from that festive meal, because both ideas were that they were now being accepted by greater society and by the king himself. Okay, Now, with this, we can understand something very intriguing. In the book of the Megillah, it says, and all the servants, all the king's servants who were at the king's gate would kneel and prostrate themselves before Haman, for so had the king commanded. But Mordechai would neither kneel or prostrate himself. He wouldn't kneel, he wouldn't prostrate himself. And when Haman saw that Mordechai would neither kneel nor prostrate himself before him, Haman became full of wrath. But it seemed contemptible to him to lay hands on Mordechai alone, for they had told him Mordechai's nationality, and Haman sought to destroy all of the Jews who were throughout Ahasuerus' entire kingdom, Mordechai's people. So what does it sound like over here? Anybody? On face value, it sounds like Mordechai, his behavior is in a certain way downright baffling. Why did he go out of his way to provoke Haman? Look who he's starting a fight with, the second in command. The Midrash actually tells us that Esther sent a frantic message to Mordechai asking him to stop instigating and quarreling with Haman. Talmud, in the tractate Megillah, Scripture states that there was a certain Jew, Yehudi, in the capital city of Shushan, whose name was Mordechai, the son of Yair, the son of Shimi, the son of Kish, a Benyaminite from Binyamin. Rav expounded the congregation of Israel, said, look what the Yehudim has done to me and how the Benyaminite has repaid me. What is the Yehudim has done to me refers to David's culpability for not killing Mordechai's grandfather, Shimi, although he was liable to the death penalty, which allowed for Mordecai's birth and eventual incitement of Haman's jealous vendetta against the Jewish people. And how Binyamin has repaid me refers to Saul's culpability for not immediately killing Haman's grandfather, Amaleki king Agag. So what is the Talmud telling us over here? When the Talmud is telling us over here, interesting, that when we refer to him as from Yehuda and from Binyamin, is an allusion that King David did not kill Mordecai's grandfather Shimi, who was liable for the death penalty, which means that therefore Mordecai was was given birth, who ultimately incited Haman, which ultimately led to Haman wanting to annihilate the Jewish people. And likewise, it says from Binyamin, because King Saul was from the tribe of Binyamin. Again, a reference, an allusion, the Talmud is telling us, to the fact that Saul did not kill Agag, who was the king of the Amalekis. And hence, on either side, we wouldn't have had this problem of dealing with Haman, who was a descendant of Amalek. So what the Talmud is actually telling us here, it seems that who is the one who caused this whole problem? Mordechai. He created because he is provoking Haman. So much so that Esther has to send him a message. Hey, watch what you're doing. You're starting up with the wrong guy. Lo yichra v'lo yishtachave. Now we know that for three things that you have to be ready to give up your life. Right? Now, you don't murder another person to save your life. You don't commit adultery, right, to save your life, and you don't commit idolatry, for certain. But what happened over here with Mordechai, his behavior was a little different. He was sitting in the king's gate. He could have removed himself. He didn't have to be in the line of action. Oops. Excuse me. I don't know why it rings when you shut it off. He was in the line of an angry, jealous, egomaniac, power-hungry Haman. He could have removed himself on a daily basis because every day everybody would bow down to Haman. And as Mordecai was in the king's court, one person didn't. He didn't have to be there, but he chose to be there. So obviously there's something over here that Mordecai did that was important for him to do. And even though on the surface, only on the surface, it seems provocative, it seems unnecessary, and it may even seem to result in horrific end. Any questions so far?
Yeah, I guess just out of curiosity, what did Mordecai's dad do that earned him the death penalty? What was the crime?
Grandfather. Oh, actually, we learned about it in Tanya. He cursed King David, the king. But if you recall, in the fourth part of Tanya, we learned about it from the letters of the Alter Rebbe about Shimi ben Gera, who cursed King David, and King David said, "Oh, God has sent me a curse," and so he understood it, even though he was obliged it because curse the king, right? King David took it as a sign from heaven and didn't do anything to him. So the Talmud is saying that if he would have been killed, there would have been no Mordechai, and there wouldn't have been this problem, right? I mean, as people saw it as such, right? That's obviously, we're talking about on the surface, on the face of things, right? That's what we're talking about. Of course, the fact that Mordechai did this, there's something much more deeper and profound here that we need to understand, as we're going to go into and appreciate. But on the surface of it, this is what the Talmud is explaining to us and how the people, and even Esther, observed things at the time. Yeah? Clear? Wonderful. Okay. Any other questions? Thank you, Katie, and welcome. Any other questions? We're good? Okay, wonderful. Now remember who Mordechai is. He's the, spiritual leader of the Jewish people. He's, the Rebbe of his generation. So he's able to identify, the real problems of the generations and the real solutions that are necessary for the generation. He understood very clearly how the Jews were assimilating, and this was a real threat, and he decided to act forthright. So when Haman was, promoted to minister and commands everybody to bow to him, while he has an idol on his side, Mordecai didn't avoid the confrontation. Instead, he took the bull by the horns to demonstrate to the people something. That you don't allow anything or anyone to control you. He refuses to bow, to send a clear message to the Jewish people. That even if it's the most powerful individual in your community, in your nation, is ultimately has no power over you. No one can make you violate your principles. We have to stop abandoning our faith and putting our hopes into assimilation. God alone is our protector. This is the very stark, visible message that he is giving. Lo yichra v'lo yishtachave. He doesn't bow, he doesn't prostrate himself. To show and to give strength to empower the Jewish people, we need to seize this moment. Jews are weakening in their faith. They're concerned that, to be part of a melting pot in order that life should be good for them. Well, we want life to be good for you, but not to the degree that there should be a melting pot that you should lose and assimilate, become part of the world around you and lose your identity and lose your faith. So he has to stand very strong, literally, as a shining example to the entire Jewish people. Now, once the decree is publicized, he also understands that this decree ultimately, not because of him, it's because of the Jews who are doing the opposite. And therefore, he understands it's because of the assimilation and that people are buying into, bowing, as we said, as Rav Shimon Bar Yochai says, bowing down to the idolatry of the day. And again, it doesn't mean just literally bowing down. It meant beginning to bow down to the values, giving up your values in order that you can assimilate into the world around you. And that's what happens with the Jew. A Jew doesn't come to bow to idolatry. It doesn't work that way. They adopt values that are not Jewish values. They're not Torah values. And then little by little, from there, you end up being engaged in idolatry. All right? And then you throw off God as your protector. And then what happens is, of course, the 70 wolves are fair game for one sheep. So he recognizes that that's the true reality and that his behavior is to empower the Jewish people. Now, once the decree is public and the Jews are staring down, extermination, Mordechai isn't affected by that. He wasn't affected on one side of the coin. He's not affected on the other side of the coin. What does he do? He gathers the Jewish people, and in a public and in a sincere manner, he tries to bring the Jewish people back to their commitment, back to their values. You want to assimilate? You want to bow down and give in your values? No. He gathers Jews in a public way to pray to God, to do tshuva, to make gatherings of Jewish children, showing that, this is our pride and joy is in our children, and that we will stand strong for who we are. So once he sort of reconnects the Jews to their truth, to their values, no longer should they be bowing down to the values around them, then and only then, what does he do? He goes to Esther, and he says, Esther, you need to approach the king, and you need to take from a political level, of beseeching the king for the benefit and the welfare of the Jewish people, right? But he only does that after he brings the Jewish people to the awareness of not to bow down to the values. How does that not bowing down to the values expressed? By openly, renting, Shea Stadium and having 90,000 people coming to openly, rah, rah, rah for being Jewish. Not for the New York Mets or the New York Yankees, right? But sorry for the New Yorkers here, Linda and Denise there. They're having a good time with this one. But rah, 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 that we're Jewish and openly Jewish. So once that is established, reconnecting the Jews to the true protectorate and to God Almighty, and you've taken care of the sort of the spiritual break and the breach that there was. Now you can sort of, you got money in the bank. Once you have money in the bank, now you can go and try to bank on the political game. What's that? Esther go and approach Achashverosh. Is that idea clear? Any questions on that? Great.
Rabbi, I have one question.
Sure.
You mentioned that it was Esther that has the merit of saying that it should be.
Oh, yeah, we're leaving that right now until we finish this part. Then we'll come back to it.
Okay.
I left you hanging with that. We're going to get back to it. I didn't forget. Thank you for reminding me. Okay. Yes. Now, by the way, it wasn't just, of course, Mordecai. Mordecai, being the leader of the Jewish people, he led them. And Esther, of course, followed that also. What did she do? What did Esther do? She risked her life to bring kosher food into the palace. Remember, she's the queen. And she wouldn't eat non-kosher. Jew can't eat non-kosher. She risked her life to bring food into the palace. Imagine, but you mean the food from the king's palace is not good enough? He already got rid of Vashti, one queen earlier that didn't listen. Queens can easily come and go, right? Back in that world. And she risked her life to do that. Furthermore, when the time came for her to go to Achashverosh, what's the first thing that she said to Mordecai? She said, you know what? I and my maidens, we will fast. And likewise, the Jewish people should fast, which is very counterintuitive. She's going to Achashverosh as the queen, right? Why was she chosen as the queen, anybody? Because she got the highest marks in Oxford University, of course. Harvard, I'm sorry for the Americans. Can I have some smiles over here, some laughter? Okay, good. Right? Why was she chosen? For her beauty. You fast for three days, you lose your beauty. You're not as, vibrant. Yet she does that. Why? Because she recognizes herself that the root cause of everything ultimately is the Jewish people and their assimilation, and they have to do tshuva, and she's doing her part in that of bringing the Jewish people back to their sensibilities, back to their faith, back to lo yichra v'lo yishachva, not to bow down to the values of the nation around them. Is that clear? And then she comes to Achashverosh. Yes, Alice, you had a question?
Say that she was green and not so beautiful. You just found favor to in his eyes, and it was just shock of brothers. And that's one of the things I heard somewhere.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. You have to.
That she was green. That her complexion was green, and she wasn't all that beautiful.
Oh,
That's what I heard.
I'm not certain about that. I don't recall that.
Yeah. No, I don't know that.
I think maybe some of the makeup that she was putting on for 6 months in preparation, was maybe some green powder or something. But definitely she was beautiful.
I heard that as well. That she was green. To say that. I heard it as well that she had a green complexion.
Right.
So we have to got it from somewhere.
No. Yeah, but beautiful she was. The makeup. There was a preparation process that she went through in order to be in the beauty pageant, to be chosen amongst all of the maidens of Shushan, right? In any case, fasting doesn't help. You're not as strong, you're not as vivacious, and and does diminish your beauty. So there's definitely there's no question that beauty had something to do with being chosen. There's no question about that, right? I don't know if it was the only thing, but I don't think that there was anything overly intellectual that it was involved. But in any case.
There was no talent competition part of the.
Right, there was only one out. Yeah, well said. Well said. Okay. So now to the turnabout of the Jewish people at that time was so great that there's a phrase in the Megillah that says Kima v'kiblu Yehudim, that the Jewish people it says that they fulfilled and kept they kept their commitment. So the Talmud says they kimu mashikibu kfar, they fulfilled and sustained what they already accepted, and now they brought it to new heights. What did we accept? Where did we accept things? In Mount Sinai. Mount Sinai, we accepted the Torah. Jewish people said Nasa v'nishma, that we will do and we will listen. We are totally there to be a servant of God. But the Talmud tells us that actually that was not really fully realized. Why? Why was it that it wasn't fully realized, our acceptance of God, of walking in the ways of Hashem, of bowing down to God and not to idolatry, that keeping our value system and not a value system? Why was it not truly something that was sustained in the time of giving the Torah, but now in the story of Purim it was? Very simple. One word. At Mount Sinai, no, the Jews weren't tested. We weren't tested in our faith at Mount Sinai, but in the story of Purim, we were totally tested. We were tested with a decree. And what did that decree bring out? The Jews didn't assimilate more. They recognized the falsehood of their ways, that and being squeezed now because of this decree, they recognize we forsake the true shepherd, and therefore they return to Hashem. So the Talmud tells us that the ultimate true acceptance of God as being our true shepherd and protector was in the story of Purim, and not by the giving of the Torah. Is that clear? Now, who were the great role leaders? Who won the Emmys over here? It's Mordechai and Esther. And they both were on the same page, but with a different nuance in this entire story. Some of it we might have picked up previously on how Esther responded to Mordechai. Let's take this a little further. Again, what happened? Mordechai, in a brazen manner, completely refuses to recognize Haman. Haman is, for all intents and purposes, doesn't exist. He's not a true reality, right? Where does that concept come from? Come on, from Tanya. All of you have learned Tanya. Where in Tanya do we have this idea? What do you mean Haman doesn't exist? It's not a true reality? Because, give me one word. What is he? One word.
Russia,
Huh?
Russia, Russia.
Yeah, he's a Russia, therefore, exactly, he's a Russia. Tell me a little more. One
Well,
word. Give me from
People,
Tanya. Give me a word from Tanya. Tim.
Akshatrakwa. I don't know.
Oh,
That's
very good. Sitaracher. Another word for Sitaracher. Klipa.
people.
Mhm.
Okay.
Klipa is a shell that covers over on what's inside of the shell, right? That's a metaphor to understand that which is the antithesis of godliness, right? Why is he a Rasha? Because he chooses to get his vitality from Klipa, from Sitaracha, from the other side, not from God's holiness, which is God giving life face to face, like a mother gives vitality to her children through food, through the love that she gives in her food. Sitaracher is the other side. It's God giving vitality to something that ultimately, does God really want it? No. Does he truly want to give to an evil person vitality? No. It is, in a sense, forced, compelled. On a simple level, we've learned this before. If not, if you don't have light and darkness and equality and good and evil on an equal basis, then you won't have freedom of choice. At a deeper level, ultimately, that through klipa, through the hiding of God's presence, it will bring us to come closer to God, to do tshuva, as the Jewish people did. So, but Haman, he is the embodiment of klipa, of negativity, of evil. And evil is darkness. Klipa is the absence of godliness. So, for all intents and purposes, it is a non-existent reality in the eyes of Mordechai. That is something that you don't give credence to. Therefore, lo yichrab lo yishtachaveh. That's how he sees it. And he sees it further, that this was the whole reality, is that the Jewish people didn't recognize the true reality of God in their life. And therefore, that's what happened when you don't. There's a slippery slope that starts with values that you now entertain, values of the world around you, that finally those values is that, first of all, you enjoy, the festive meal because you're called by the powers that be. And then eventually you come to idolatry, to full-blown idolatry, right? That's Mordechai. What's Esther? Esther sees the world a little differently. She doesn't see it black and white the way Mordechai does. Well, after all, she's a Jewish girl that's trapped in the palace with a king that's not Jewish, right? She has to kind of balance things in a way that is a bit tricky. She brings kosher food in, but she's got to hide it. She can't openly portray herself as a Jew, so much so that when she came to Achashverosh to plead the case of the Jewish people, that's when she identified herself for the first time as a Jew. So she kind of was doing this balancing act, and that's why she encourages Mordechai to not antagonize Haman, right? Now, what does this mean? What it means is that they had a different perspective ultimately on how to view the situation. And after the whole story is said and done, they also had a different view on how to see it. The Jews are saved. God is our protector. The Jews return to Hashem. And not only is the decree annulled, but we're defeat our enemies. And it's time a festivity, right? But the question is now, how do we look at what happened? How do we look at the whole events? So how does Mordechai look at it? He looks at it as a spiritual conquest. That's how he sees it. It was a matter of spirit. It was him and his spirit that rose to the occasion of not to bow down, that empowered the Jewish people. Yes, on the surface, it looked like it brought some negativity, but that was not the true reality, right? The true reality was the Jewish people's actions. And by him acting in such a way that empowered them spiritually, so much so that then when there was indeed a decree, what happened? The Jewish people were empowered, followed Mordechai. They openly declared their Jewishness. Not a single Jew, during the year of the decree, they could have said, hey, I'm not a Jew. I give up my faith. I give up my religion. And you know what? There wouldn't have been a decree against that Jew. It was only those who declared their Jewishness. All the Jewish people did. Why? Because they were empowered. They got the strength from Mordechai. So the salvation is a purely spiritual thing. The consequence of it was a defeat of the enemy and no longer a worry of being annihilated. Haman himself, his 10 sons, and all those that were anti-Semites of the time, they were taken care of. So what is this holiday really? It's a Yom Tov, it's a spiritual day, right? Of Jews reignited, rededicated to the ways of Torah mitzvahs of Hashem, right? But Esther, she saw it differently because she was living a different physical reality, being in the house of Achashverosh, or in the palace of Achashverosh. And she insisted, no. She saw it more from the physical level of the annihilation of the Jewish people, even though, of course, there was a spiritual component to it. But she saw it as there's physical reality over here of annihilation of our people. And that's how she sees it. Let's take a look over here. Little small print. I don't know if you'll be able, hopefully be able to see it. The Rebbe says, arguably, just as Mordechai and Esther took differing approaches in their efforts to combat the decree, they emphasized different aspects of the eventual miracle. Mordechai emphasized the unprecedented spiritual victory the Jews had won, namely that their return was so complete, as the Talmud says, they ordain what was already taken upon themselves, that the act of accepting it willingly in the time of Achashverosh managed to remove the substantial caveat from back at Matan Torah. Remember, we mentioned that Matan Torah, the Jewish people accepted, but they had no real test to prove that they were really ready to accept God's ways. But here, being that there was a decree against them, and they willingly now accepted because they could have opted out, as mentioned. If anybody declared that they're not Jewish, there isn't a decree against them. But every Jew maintained their Jewishness, right? So it was for this reason that Mordechai wanted to make the holiday of Purim a day of prohibited of labor, not unlike Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, and the day when historically the Jews received the second tablets, also on Mount Sinai, of course. He intended to provide Jews for all future generations a day to properly dedicate their time to Purim's soul-centered nature. That's what he wanted to do. He wanted to celebrate it, but as a holiday, like Yom Kippur. As a matter of fact, the name of Purim is like Yom HaKippurim, like the day of Purim. So there's a correlation between the two. He wanted to correlate the two, and therefore it should be a day of, just like Yom Kippur is a spiritual day. So this also needs to be a spiritual day, because in the end, It was the spiritual acts of the Jewish people that comprises the true miracle that the Jew is really committed, even under dire times. Esther, however, prioritized the miracle aspect as it was expressed in the actual salvation from Haman's decree to destroy, kill, and cause to perish all the Jews, both young and old, little children and women. In other words, Esther stressed the rescue of the Jewish body. As Mordechai Yofi writes, contrasting the overtly spiritual Hanukkah miracle of the oil on Purim, the decree was to destroy and kill the Jews' bodies and not their souls. That is why the eventual rescue from a material threat was commemorated with joy, expressed specifically through feasting, as opposed to Hanukkah, where the eight-day miracles' spiritual nature does not require a daily meal. So, again, Esther is seeing it from more from a physical reality, as she was in the house of Achashverosh, dealing with it from a more physical point of view, annihilation of the Jewish people. That's what Haman wanted to do. Yes, there is the cause of it, and there is what the Jews did ultimately to contribute to the decree and to the annulment of the decree. Absolutely. But on the face of it, what is this? Annihilation of the people. Well, that is annihilation of the body of the people, so it needs to be celebrated not in a spiritual sense like Yom Kippur, but in a physical sense. Have a festive meal, not like Hanukkah, where it's the oil of the miracle of Hanukkah. That it's what we primarily celebrate. Yeah, we have a few latkes and a sufganiyot, but the main emphasis is lighting up a menorah. Purim, emphasis is a day of just great joy, physical joy, having a festive meal, giving shalach manas, giving physical foods, ready to eat foods, not even just, you can't give a frozen steak to your friend, Yeah. You have to give cooked food, that something's ready to eat, and others ready to celebrate in a physical way, because it was about a physical annihilation. So that's how they differed in how they perceive things. And ultimately, this is why she says, Kisvuni l'deiros, right? For me, for generations. Mordechai, in the end, was in agreement, but he didn't come up with the idea because he didn't perceive things in the perspective that she did. She saw it in a very blunt, the way it is, shall we say, feet on the ground, right? And Mordecai saw really the way things are in heaven. In heaven, that's where the decree came from. And therefore, you need to work on it from heaven's perspective. And there isn't Esther doesn't argue that, because she herself says, I'm going to fast with my maidens before she goes into the king, because she understands that it does start there. But she says it starts there. But indeed, how do we as human beings down here, how do we, live life? We're not such spiritualists as Mordecai from his perspective. We live life down here from our perspective. And from our perspective, hey, there's a decree of annihilation here of everyone, from the elders to the young, to the youngsters, from the men to the women, and everybody. And therefore, there is something here that needs to be celebrated on that level, and in that manner of appreciation. So she says, Kitzvuni l'deiros, it should be written for generations. In the end, Mordechai is in agreement, but it's not the one to initiate it. Because she saw, just like a mother, senses the physical welfare of the children in a very visceral manner. So she also experiences, as in that respect, for the Jewish people, a very, clear and emphatic manner, the way things are in this world. Any questions?
I have a question.
Andrew, go for it.
I thought the difference between Purim and the giving of the Torah was really put forth in the Midrash, where basically God offered the Torah to everybody else and then offered it to us and held the mountain over our heads. And we, in essence, accepted it kind of arm twisting wise, where here they really wanted, they understood they were going to be annihilated, and they accepted the yoke of the Torah. That it was, they really wanted to remain Jewish.
Yes, that's not a contradiction to what we just said.
Okay.
In other words, the way what you're saying is thank you for sharing that, Andrew. I put it in different words. At Mount Sinai, they weren't tested with anything; they just accepted. And Andrew, as you said, and they accepted it because God's presence is so real, just like a mountain over their heads, right? It's so real. So likewise, God's presence was so real that they accepted it. But it wasn't out of being tested that are you really and truly accepting it, or is it just because God's reality is very real at this moment? But when God's reality will not be present, as it was in the story of Purim, they were tested at that time. Would they accept or would they not accept? Remember, they were already starting to assimilate. And because of that assimilation, the protectorate wasn't there, wasn't clearly protecting them before that, and even more so after that. So for them to now come and accept and to do tshuva, that's something that had to come from themselves, because God wasn't showering them with anything that was obvious of him except annihilation. And they recognize that this is their actions that brought to this, and therefore they need to change their ways. Yeah, so it ties in from from the side door rather than maybe the the front door, or the same idea. Very good though, thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Yeah. Rabbi,
Yes.
you mentioned that the idea to write the Megillah came from Esther, but who actually wrote it?
I guess it was the Sanhedrin. There was the Sanhedrin High Court at the time. So I'm not certain. It was the sages of the time, which was the Sanhedrin, which Mordecai was a part of.
Mm-hmm. So it could have been written by Mordecai.
I'm sure that he had, a part in it. I don't know offhand if it says anywhere specifically who, but clearly it was in the hands of the sages of the time. As she asked the sages of the time, which the sages of the time were of the Sanhedrin, because it was the Sanhedrin that was still still had the high court, high Jewish court.
But of the same time, it wasn't like 50 years later.
Oh, no.
decided
For the Shana above and the next year already, right? They already that they celebrated it. It was the following year that they already celebrated. Both giving, as it says, each matanos le'ehu, they gave matanos le'evyanim, they gave gifts to the poor, and they gave gifts of food to each other. That says clearly in the Megillah, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which, God willing, Thursday night and Friday, we all have to hear the whole Megillah.
Yeah.
The whole Megillah. We need to hear that. Make sure that you and I'm sorry, but Zoom doesn't do it. That doesn't Zoom it. So you can't do it on Zoom. You have to actually hear it in person. So make sure you register at your local Chabad or your local wherever you go to hear the whole Megillah. And of course, Friday during the day, make sure that you give gifts to the poor. For those who I give to poor families here and in Israel. If you're want to be a part of that, just on the day itself, you have to do it. Like you can't give the money now for then. You have to give it on the day. If you're interested, we're going to post a place so you can put some tzedakah, and that will make sure it gets to needy families and people that can celebrate properly and have what they need. And that's it. All right, folks. Yes, Marty. Yes, very good. All right. Any other questions? You guys are okay? So how's everybody celebrating?
I think our local Chabad's going to have, and they always read it.
Okay, great. To make
So-
sure. Make sure that
Yeah, I
you're-
usually go the night and then I go the next morning.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Beautiful. All right, so Andrew, you're taken care of. Everybody else? Yeah?
Go to Rabbi Zelman Popek's.
Say hello to him for me, please.
I certainly will.
Great.
Did Esther ever have children?
Yes, Darius the second.
Oh,
was the
yes.
king and
Oh.
allowed the Jews to rebuild the second holy temple, right?
Okay. For some reason yeah, okay. I
Yep.
couldn't think
Oh,
of it.
good question. Valid question. Valid question. All right, we have online over here Sandy and Paula, Howard. All right. All right, folks. Wishing everybody a freilich and Purim, a joyous one. As the last time that we got together, Chabad Zich and Kadeshim, as several that are here tonight, and remember it was a year ago. So we are anticipating again being able to come together, and it's been too long, so you can celebrate. And you're all anybody from out of town, you're all welcome to come join us. I have a little problem getting over the border right now, but hopefully all that's going to end soon. All right. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.
God
Thank
bless
you,
you. Be
Rabbi.
well. A fair little boring. Be
Yeah.
well, everybody. Enjoy the holiday.